Hello friends, and welcome to Last Night's Table. If you've ever played a game of Dungeons & Dragons, or probably any role-playing game in a position where you've been running the game, you've probably had one of those days where you had some kind of expectation that your party was going to perform some kind of action, and then they completely subvert it and do something totally different. Last night was one of those nights. But if we're being honest, most nights are one of those nights, so without further ado, let's get into it. In alphabetical order, we start with Aksu, who is a lizard folk ranger. She doesn't really understand normal human emotions and customs, but she's doing her best. Next, we have Dowlid, who is a wizard from a far-off land. Dowlid, unfortunately, their player couldn't make it to the game last night, so we're just pretending that they just weren't there. Dristan is a fallen Aasimar paladin who has sworn an oath of vengeance against those who kidnapped him as a child. Muse is a half-orc barbarian who's like the big sister to the group and is fiercely protective of those that she loves. Olame is a satyr bard who is always scheming and stirring the pot. Palisade is a tiefling detective rogue and serves as the babysitter/moral compass for the group. We open with the events immediately following the previous game. The party was having a barbecue on Olame's new farm that she's opened for all of the tieflings of Landenport. Unfortunately, the barbecue was attacked by werewolves in the middle of the night. During the attack, a gnome businessman who's very shady and unscrupulous by the name of Beau Barnabas Quimbley tried to steal some of the barbecue so that he could get their secret recipe. The party knocked out Beau, killed most of the werewolves, and are left picking up the pieces the next morning. They start by deciding what they have to do with Beau. Palisade says, well, he just tried to steal some of our barbecue, that's what he's done, so we should turn him into the police. Olame points out, well, all he really did was try to steal some food at a cookout, so there's really nothing to prosecute for, which Palisade agrees with, but then Olame says, we should just kill him. This does seem a little out of character for Olame, but she's been a little bit on edge ever since the party confused her doppelganger for her and started treating her like a second-class citizen. Finally, they decided that we should just ask Beau what's going on and interrogate him before they end up deciding his fate entirely. Beau starts to wake up, probably has a concussion, and begins to explain his story of what happened. So the party accuse him of coming into the barbecue in order to steal some more food so that he could sell it to his employer, Nomale Food Company. Beau starts by deflecting. He says that, well, y'all were having a cookout, and it would be neighborly to assume that somebody could just come in and get a second helping if they wanted. So really, it's the party who's being unreasonable here and just not being neighborly and, frankly, a little bit rude. Muse screams in his face in a way that only an orcish barbarian could, and Beau pretty quickly drops the act and shifts gears here. He says that, well, his whole life has been based around barbecue. He represents mean greens, condiments, and sauces. He says that everything in his whole life has been dealing with barbecue, but you know what? The people that he's been working for, this mean green, is they're basically just shilling cheap sauce and saying it's good stuff, and he's been disgusted by it, and he didn't even realize it until he got a taste of their special barbecue recipe. Muse asks him if the barbecue was worth dying for, and Beau takes a long moment to consider. Before finally he says, yes, yeah, if I'm not walking out of here anyway, I want to have some of that barbecue. The party consider their options. If they kill Beau, probably another person like him is going to take their place, where someone from Nomale is going to be trying to steal Olame's new secret barbecue recipe. If they let him go, Beau's just going to do it himself anyway. And Palisade points out that they have a third option that they hadn't considered, is that they could hire Beau on to help out around the farm and the barbecue pits. Beau loves that idea. He'd like to get back to his roots of actually cooking rather than just slinging cheap sauces. And he has a number of contacts that the party might end up actually being able to use on their farm, and, you know, food service and suppliers and routes and all those things that, you know, I don't know anything about personally, but Beau certainly does. After a brief deliberation, the party decides that they are going to hire Beau on conditionally. He's not allowed to know what the secret barbecue recipe is because that's just too dangerous, but he is able to have as much of the barbecue he wants while he's cooking, but he is going to be cooking and working hard for them. Beau accepts the offer, and the party untie him. Now, with the matter of their prisoner being dealt with, the party realized that they should probably do a head count on all the tieflings to make sure that nobody, died, and make sure that all of the werewolves are still accounted for. Not counting Palisade, there's still one tiefling left on the farm, and that's Rapture, who is really excited to be working on the farm, so decided to hide on the farm itself. They get Rapture to round up as many tieflings as they can, make sure that none of them were hurt during the raid, although it looks like they did all just kind of scamper off. They also point out that if any of them had been attacked in the raid, it's definitely possible that they might have contracted lycanthropy. So they should be keeping an eye out for anything untoward that might indicate that somebody is a werewolf. Rapture points out that would that count as a werewolf trying to crawl away, and points out to the field where one of the werewolves indeed is playing dead and was trying to crawl away. The party quickly catch up to the werewolf, and Dristan stakes him to the ground using his silver sword through the wolf's knee, which, ouch. They ask who sent them to the farm, and the wolf answers that it's their leader, another werewolf by the name of Skull. Skull doesn't like the idea of people encroaching upon his territory, which the wolf points out is the old growth forest not too far away from the farm that the party is currently living on. The party asks how many more werewolves there are in the woods with Skull, not counting the ones that they just killed the night before, and the werewolf answers that there's probably a good 20 or 30 head left. And that's a lot of werewolves. Having their questions answered, the party decide to kill the werewolf. Whether it's out of mercy or pragmatism is open to interpretation. Muse says that they should go talk to the Skull fella and see, what his problem is. The rest of them say, well, no, there's 20 or 30 werewolves and you're probably going to pick a fight as soon as we can, so maybe that's not such a good idea today. In fact, Palisade and Milton both got bit during the raid the night before, so it's probably a good idea that we should check over our wounds, make sure that none of us are going to start getting a little bit hairier, and see what we can do from here. Milton himself isn't too far away. He had brought a whole bunch of booze to the party to sort of liven things up, but realized that when the fighting had started, all the patrons had just kind of run away for the werewolves, dropping their drinks where they were, so now he's just picking up empty bottles. The party tell Milton, hey, come on friend, it's time to go. We're going back to town. We're going to go visit the church and see if somebody can confirm or deny that we are cursed with lycanthropy. Milton says that he only got bit a little bit, so he's not too worried about it, but if they're really concerned for him, then he'll go get himself checked out too. It takes some time to get into town, but it is pretty uneventful, and the party soon find themselves at the Grand Cathedral of Landonport. Cardinal Bishop, who's the head of the church and Dristan's main contact within, is currently sleeping. He had come to the cookout himself too, but he left pretty early because, well, he's an old man and he's not up to all-nighters like the party apparently is. Dristan does wake him up though because he considers this to be an emergency, and Cardinal Bishop does end up looking over the rest of the party to see if anybody else was wounded. Specifically, they point out Palisade and Milton, who everyone had seen had been bitten. And he's still sleepy, but he says Milton looks pretty okay, but Palisade, yeah, you better get that checked out. Palisade asks if it's possible that Cardinal Bishop himself is able to, perform the curse removal, if that's something that the church is able to provide. And he says that, yeah, it is something that we can do here, but it is like there are expensive reagents that we need in order to do it, and we also need to get some Wolfsbane as well. Now, the party has recently come into some money, so they're not too worried about the expensive reagents, but Wolfsbane is a bit of a thornier issue. First of all, we don't even know where to get it. So they ask Cardinal Bishop, where can we get some Wolfsbane? And he says, well, he knows that there's a patch that grows not too far outside of town in an old growth forest. Hey, that's pretty close to where your farm is. The party's a little miffed about it, that, they're so close to it and decide not to go. But that's okay. They've got until the next full moon, which is about a month away, so they're not too concerned about going there right this second anyway, and decide that it's probably best. Milton's had a really long day. He's been going through a lot lately. Let's take him home and get him to bed, maybe. On the way to Milton's home, though, they do stop by a traveling merchant by the name of Takir, who is selling various magical items. Although each item seems to have a bit of a catch that is not explained until money has changed hands. Olame ends up picking up a bag of holding which is slightly used. Everything that she puts into it comes out covered in glitter. Oxu is excited to find a rope of climbing, this magical rope that, when you say the command word of Jabanthamus, is going to actually climb up the surface like it's a snake and end up tying and knotting itself where you need it to be. And it's also able of knotting itself so that you can get advantage on any kind of check in order to climb. The catch is that the rope has a mind of its own, and if it doesn't have specific instructions or if it's left unattended, it'll just do what it wants. Dristan picks himself up a decanter of endless water. This is basically just a pitcher that will continue to pour out water at a variable volume of flow. The catch is, though, that there is a little bit of a hairline fracture in it, and it is constantly leaking, and he doesn't realize this until he puts it into his backpack. Last but not least, Muse picks up a hat of disguise, which Takir demonstrates himself by putting it on and transforming into a gnome and says, look at this, Well, the catch that she finds out after he buys it is that the hat of disguise is only useful for making disguises of gnomes. Still, even if there are a couple of catches to all of them, the party find them to be pretty useful items and they're happy with their purchases. And finally, they take Milton home. When they get Milton to his home, though, Palisade remembers that the day before, Milton was saying that his father had taken suddenly ill. And she realizes that, even though Milton's been through a lot lately, this is a lot of what he's been through, we should maybe see if we can bring him a doctor or something, just somebody to get a second opinion and make sure that it's not something more nefarious going on. Dristan says, well, I'm a bit of a healer myself. I can go take a look at him. And Milton agrees, his dad is not a super friendly person, but he'll, Dristan is friends with Milton. He'll let him take a look at him at least. So Milton says that he'll go make everybody tea while they're waiting, and Dristan goes upstairs to Martin McAllister's room to go check him out. Martin McAllister is lying on what is basically his deathbed. He says, who are you? Dristan introduces himself as Milton's friend, and Martin says, oh yes, Milton's told me about you. Dristan says that he'd like to make sure that Martin's doing okay because, the McAllisters have been a benefactor to the party for a while. And Martin is a little doubtful that Dristan's able to help because he doesn't look like a skilled healer. He's standing here wearing his full plate and his big old sword and everything. But he says, you know what, if it'll make you happy, come take a look. So Dristan casts the spell, Detect Poison and Disease. Remember before we started how I said sometimes things don't go the way that you're expecting when you're planning the game? Yeah, I forgot Paladin's got that spell. So the cat's out of the bag, and Martin McAllister has been poisoned with none other than Wolfsbane. Dristan informs him of this and says, well, you've got a bit of a problem. I'm going to see if I can get to the bottom of this. But in the meantime, he lays on hands and neutralizes the poison and gives him a little bit of extra healing just in case. Martin McAllister feels better than he has in weeks, and thanks Dristan for helping him out. The spell lasts for a little bit longer, so Dristan starts looking around to see if he can find the source of the poison, and he finds an old cup of tea that just kind of pings off of the spell and says that's where the poison was for sure. Dristan asks him where he got the tea from, and he says, well, after I took ill, Milton gave the servants the day off, and wait a minute, he's been bringing me my tea, my own son, how could he? So Dristan hurries down to the kitchen where, sure enough, Milton is making tea for the rest of the group, and they're just about to drink some when he knocks it all on the floor. For a moment, the party's like, hey, what gives? And then Dristan explains what was going on. Milton is beside himself. He's got only a few friends in the world, and the idea that he almost poisoned them all just makes him really kind of miserable. The party asks who else might have had access to the herbal tea, as Milton was calling it. And he says, well, they do have a personal shopper as one of the servants who would be able to go and procure it, potentially. But really, any of the servants might have been able to, honestly. What they ought to do is go talk to the head servant, Michael, who has a little guest house on the property, and see if he knows, where they might be able to get a hold of anybody. There is the catch that Milton did give all of them some vacation time, so he's hoping that they're in right now, but it is possible that Michael is away. But not to be deterred, the party goes straight to the guest house on the grounds and see if Michael is home. Milton starts banging on the door asking if Michael is home, but isn't doing it with enough gusto or fervor, so Muse just kicks in the door. Everyone explains to Muse that, well, this is a bit of a problem. Milton says, oh, don't worry, I'll have one of my servants. I'll wait. They're all on vacation. So Mew says that's not a problem either, picks up the door and just leans it against the door frame. The party take a look inside of Michael's home, and they don't see any sign of him. But Palisade has a keen, investigative mind, takes a look around the property, and sees that Michael has all kinds of fishing posters and trophies and such all around, but doesn't see any sign of fishing equipment or hip waders or anything, so he's probably gone fishing. While snooping around, they also find Michael's black book, which is just a list of contact information for all of the servants in the house. As head servant, he's basically got like a management role keeping track of all of these people. And they do see that they recently hired a gardener, a maid, and a personal shopper. The party tell Milton to hang out at home, see to his father, who should be doing better now, and they're going to go track down Michael to see if they can find any more leads. So they go down to the waterfront where the best fishing in Lanaport has had, especially according to Aksu, who's an experienced woodsman / apparently fisherman herself. So on her advice, they go to the busiest watering hole, and they find Michael there. Well, find him is a strong word. Mew starts shouting for Michael, who takes a look, sees, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of big, mean, adventuring-looking types. I gotta get out of here. And he jumps into a rowboat to try to make his escape. The party explain, no, we actually just want to ask you a few questions. We're friends of Milton's. You've probably seen us around the property before. And he's really kind of embarrassed and sheepish, and he climbs back out of the boat onto the docks. The party explains the situation, that it seems Master McAllister has been poisoned, and Michael is beside himself. He's very alarmed and seems to be genuinely concerned and disturbed by this news. The party asks if he's hired any new help recently, and he says, yes, I've hired a few people, a gardener, a personal shopper, and a maid, and his story is completely corroborated by the black book that they had found in his home. They ask if he's noticed any new suspicious behavior amongst any of the servants, and he says that he can't say that he really has, honestly. Palisade tries a different tack, though, and she asks, is it possible that any of these people that have recently hired, or in general amongst the servants, have had reversal in fortunes recently? Like something either really good or really bad happened to them? And Michael thinks for a minute and says, well, yeah, now that you mention it, it does seem to me that Molly, the personal shopper, her house burned down the other day, about a week ago, and she just kept coming to work, though. Like, she seemed like everything was fine. The party finds this incredibly suspicious and decides that they ought to go pay Molly a visit. Molly's new living quarters aren't too hard to find. It's an apartment in town, and they go knock on her door. Molly's suspicious of a whole bunch of people gathered right outside of her door, but then notices that her neighbors are also suspicious of these people who are gathered outside her door, so she ushers them into her home as quickly as she can. They basically immediately start in on the questioning and say, hey, do you know what Wolfsbane is? And Molly says, no, I have no idea. And Aksu points out, well, you're obviously lying, right? Olame suggests a version of events that she believes, and stop me if I'm wrong here, Molly. It seems that maybe your house burned down recently, but somebody approached her from the Bloody Fists, maybe a Billy Bowler or one of her subordinates, and said, hey, we'll get you a new home, or we'll buy you a new place. You're just going to have to do a little favor for us and give Master McAllister a new herbal tea. The party have had a few run-ins with the Bloody Fists and fewer with Billy Bowler, the leader of them, before, but essentially they're like a criminal enterprise that is trying to consolidate their power right now. Milton recently discovered that his father, Martin McAllister, was implicated in some kind of a land transaction with Billy Bowler herself. This was to purchase the Landon estate inside of Landenport, which is a culturally and historically significant property. Molly says that, well, it sure seems like the party has a lot of the facts, but they're not actually quite right here. You see, they are completely correct that the Bloody Fist had approached her about supplying Martin McAllister with a new type of herbal tea. But the idea that her house burned down and the Bloody Fist bought her a new one is laughable. The Bloody Fists themselves had burned down her house because she had refused to poison her employer. They then threatened her and said, next time we're not going to do it while you're not home. So she finally acquiesced and put herself in the position where she was going to have to poison her boss. The party decides that Molly is just doing her best to survive here. So if she's willing to give them a little bit more help in identifying the perpetrators here, they would offer her some protection to make sure that she isn't a victim of future reprisals. Molly explains that she's been meeting a contact from the Bloody Fists behind the alley and behind the Greedy Goblin pub in Low Street, and that is the person who has been providing her with the Wolfsbane. The party find this to be acceptable terms and gives Molly instructions to continue giving them the information that Martin McAllister's health seems to be failing. She's still going to continue making appearances that she's poisoning him, but she's not to actually poison him any further. And it seems like the party has some kind of a plan for what to go on here, but it was getting pretty late in the evening, so we decided that was where we were going to be stopping for the night. And that's pretty much it. There you have it. This whole game has been a bit of a departure from what I was expecting to happen. Now, honestly, I thought that when the party first got to the farm and dealt with Bo, Barnabas, Quimbley in whatever way they were going to then move on, learn about the werewolves in the woods, and they were going to go to the werewolves and either talk or fight their way through it. And that just didn't happen. They decided all on their own that they wanted to go do something else. And those are kind of the moments in Dungeons & Dragons, or any RPG really, that I live for. You know, when your players decide that, hey, we're making the story something our own, that's really kind of a magical moment. And I'm very happy that it happened and it seemed to play out okay. And I'm not sure that they knew how far off the rails they went there. But everything did seem to follow a cohesive thread, and I'm very happy with how it turned out in the end. Anyhow, it's getting to be about that time that I should sign off. So I want to thank you for watching. You know, if you like the video, please feel free to like it and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any idea what the party should do next, or any kind of content that you'd like to hear about, feel free to give me a comment in the section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.